You're very welcome today to this Women's Mental Health Network event. My name is Louise O'Leary. I am Advocacy Manager in St. Patrick's Mental Health Services, and along with Paula and Maya, who are here with us today, and my colleague Elaine Donnelly in St. Patrick's Mental Health Services, we coordinate the Women's Mental Health Network together. We're delighted to have Sean O'Brien of As I Am and Catherine O'Keefe of Warrior Wellness, here with us today to share their insights about women's mental health and neurodivergence. Before we get to that, I'm just going to do a bit of brief housekeeping and then do a very short presentation to share about the Women's Mental Health Network and what we're about for anyone who's unfamiliar. So the first thing to say is the event is being recorded, so we can share the presentations afterwards, but we'll turn off the recording when we get to the Q&A section. We're keen to have people to feel safe to contribute as best they're more comfortable, in a way they're comfortable with. So we invite you to turn on or off your camera, whichever you prefer. We do ask people to put their full names into the beside your icon there, so we know who's here. And when we do get to the Q&A section, we will invite people to put up their hands if they want to contribute, and then we'll come to you and ask you to unmute. And of course, we'd ask that everybody's respectful of each other and each other's opinions. Something to note as well, we're going to try and take a photo at the end to mark the event, but obviously if you don't feel comfortable with that, please turn off your camera as well. And as with all our events, very conscious that, you know, we all arrive at these events with different things going on and with different levels of mental health. And so, as with all our events, which focus on women's mental health and specific issues, the topics we discuss might bring up different responses and emotions for people. So we just ask you to mind yourself and step away, take breaks, whatever you need to do to feel comfortable for yourself during the event. And we will share support and information resources as we go on. So before we move on to our wonderful speakers, I'm going to share some information about the Women's Mental Health Network for you, and I promise I won't take up too much time. Hopefully people can see the slides. Can you? No? Not yet? Hang on a sec. I'll try again. Apologies. Sorry, I'm just struggling to find it on. For some reason, it's not coming up for me as an option on my computer to share. I'm wondering if my lovely peers in the National Women's Council might be able to help me out, because I can't seem to find it on within my own sharing option here for some reason.
No problem. We'll put them.
So sorry about that. I don't know what's going on.
Worries.
It's not coming up for me. Thanks so much. So the Women's Mental Health Network, to explain, is an enterprise created by the National Women's Council and St. Patrick's Mental Health Services in collaboration. And fundamentally, it's intended as a free space and forum for anybody, any organisation or person who has an interest in women's mental health to connect and share information and learning. Oh, thank you so much. Or you might need to just enable content, I think, possibly. And then it should come up. Not working now. There we go. Oh, there we go.
Sorry, no. Oh.
It's so if you just go on to the next slide, it's okay because that was just an image anyway. Don't worry about the. There you go. The how did it start slide. Thank you. Oh, it's gone. We're having one of those days.
Sorry.
I'm sorry that I can't find it on my own computer here. Okay, we can see the slides. They're just there. Oh, there. Wonderful. Thank you so much. So thanks a million, and thanks for your patience, everybody. So how did it start? Well, in 2017 in Dublin, the World Congress on Women's Mental Health took place. And this is an event by the International Association of Women's Mental Health that happens only every 2 years. So it's a big deal. And it was a really exciting, vibrant event and drew lots of attention to really vital issues that were being overlooked within mental health and mental health services, including the issue of gender-based violence and very serious impacts and implications for women's mental health and well-being. And it really served as a sort of call to action for people present to do something about it, to connect with others, to speak out, to advocate, to improve responses. So it inspired myself and my colleague Elaine, who's head of social work now in St. Patrick's, to put together an event on domestic violence and women's mental health, to bring together people, to encourage knowledge and sharing and improve responsiveness on an issue that's really under-identified and sometimes poorly responded to in mental health services. And at that event, we had great support from the National Women's Council. It was opened by Orla O'Connor, the chair of the National Women's Council, and we had a good response to it. And in the discussion part, there was this real appetite from people present to have more spaces like this. So ourselves and the National Women's Council met and came up with this idea for the Women's Mental Health Network. And that picture in the bottom is our launch event we had on November 2018, which served also as the launch of a report by the National Women's Council on Out of Silence, women's mental health experiences in Ireland. So you can go on to the next slide there. And sorry again, you're having to do this for me. So what is the Women's Mental Health Network? I've explained a little bit about it already. Fundamentally, its aims are to provide a forum for information sharing and networking, and to advance interdisciplinary and multi-agency collaboration so that we can progress promotion and responses to women's mental health issues. And so that's why we have events today and invite experts by experience and organizations and try to share learning from different perspectives. Go on to the next one there. So our key principles are what we ask people who are interested in joining to review. And if you agree to them, then you're very welcome to join. So it's really our value statement, what the network is about and why we. So firstly, it's to recognize the gender dimension of mental health, that while women and men experience mental health difficulties to equal degrees, there are important differences as regards needs, experiences, and causative factors. Awareness and responsiveness to these differences will improve effectiveness of services and health outcomes. Gender inequalities have a powerful impact on mental health and well-being issues related to women's mental health. And this cannot be, women's mental health difficulties can't be considered without acknowledging the relevance of socioeconomic and sociocultural contexts within which women live. Gender-based violence and mental health difficulties are fundamentally linked, and mental health services have a key role to play in tackling and eliminating gender-based violence. So that's a recurrent issue we look at. You can go on to the next one there. The right to enjoy the highest attainable level of mental health is a human right. Everyone should have access to good mental health services as a basic right. Mental health policy, strategy, and services should be grounded in human rights and developed in consultation with the people in need of or accessing mental health services. And collaboration and cooperation amongst different voices and sectors working in relation to women's mental health issues is positive and necessary to promote and enable positive change and progress. So hopefully that gives you a good sense of what the network is about. Now we have added a new one for this year in response to really serious issues that are happening in Ireland and in the world. And so we hope people agree with this, that a new principle we've added is that emerging and unprecedented challenges to gender equality and related women's mental health impacts require urgent attention and responsiveness, including the climate emergency, undermining of human rights internationally, and proliferation of misogyny in various forms, including online. So in terms of the events we've had, this little video, if it works, we'll give you just a sort of a feel maybe for what they look like, because we do have lots of in-person events as well. So this was one that happened in 2019 in St. Patrick's, focused on gender-based violence and mental health. So we have speakers from Women's Aid and a psychotherapist speaker, and a lot of audience participation as well. So we try to make the events safe and inclusive and very much a sharing space. And we focus a decent amount of time as well on networking and affording an opportunity for people to connect and meet as well. So that gives you a sense, hopefully, of the feel of them. The other types of events we've had then are listed on the next two slides, and we'll give you a sense of the topics we've covered. Some topics we go back to again, like perinatal mental health, trauma-informed care. We had a standalone event, but it tends to flow through a lot of our events as a theme. Gender-based violence is an issue we come back to repeatedly. We had a couple of very specific in COVID-19, reflecting on how issues arising were challenging women's mental health and worsening gender equality. And we also had an event which focused on really an opportunity for people to look at how they were affected themselves, in particular healthcare professionals, and connect with compassion and restoration after a very difficult period during COVID-19. Mental health and midlife was an example of an event that very much came from the membership, where we were contacted and people said, we need to talk about menopause, we need to talk about caring responsibilities and the unique challenges women's mental health faces in midlife. And Catherine kindly spoke at that as well. That's most rewatched on YouTube, because a lot of these are available to watch back. So got a really big response from people. We had an event on migration, mental health and resilience. And then on the next slide, we have events from the last couple of years, which focused on mental health needs of LGBTQ plus women, gender sensitive mental health, which saw a launch of a National Women's Council report, resilience and strength, women's mental health and experience of long-term mental health conditions. And that picture at the bottom includes some of the speakers, who included experts by experience. And then we had another in-person event in the Irish Human Rights and Equality Commission in Dublin, which was about the climate crisis and women's mental health. And then we've also had periodic online networking events, which have really just been a space for members to get to know each other and share about their own areas. And then we have some side activities as well. We have web pages you can visit on the National Women's Council or St. Patrick's websites, which include resources, links to our previous events if you want to watch back. If you sign up to the network, you get a newsletter every season, and we invite contributions from members to that. And then we try and use these events to raise awareness as well, outside of the people present, about mental health issues for women that need more attention. And we also have a LinkedIn group that people can join if you want to more immediately share research or items you've seen of interest to women's mental health. So that's open to everybody as well who's a member. And then finally, in terms of who the members are, we have 440 members at present. They include a wide range of people, primarily health and mental health workers, but also experts by experience, people who work in advocacy, policy. And we do try and engage and connect with members as much as possible. And I know Paola and Maya are going to be talking about that more. And then finally, if people do ever have questions or ideas, please do contact us. That's just the last slide is sort of a prompt to get in touch if you think there's things we're missing, etc. So I know we're a few minutes behind. I hope I didn't take up too much time. If people are interested in joining, I can share links to the information. And thank you again so much for joining us today. And I'm going to pass over now to Paola and Maya.
Hi, how are you? I just get it out.
Yeah. An echo there.
Yeah. Sorry.
Unless you're doing that on purpose as some kind of cool, cool space age sort of thing.
To make sure we're all listening, Louise.
Yeah.
I don't know, did you want me to start, or have the girls to cover some items first?
I think, Catherine, they just wanted to introduce you properly and sort of set the scene. So we might give them a second to see if they can.
Perfect.
I think they were going to kind of try and log in from their own computers. So, oh, here we go. I think something's happening. Thanks so much, Catherine. Oh my goodness, I mispronounced I gave the wrong name for your company earlier, I think. I think I said Warrior Wellness instead of Wellness Warrior. Just
Don't
see
worry,
it there.
It all sounds good. Hi, Maya.
Hi. Sorry about this. I think it's just the challenges of the first webinar of the year. But my name is Maya Sapai. Unfortunately, my colleague Paula Pinzon Hernandez is not here yet, so I will just kind of speak from the National Women's Council as a co-partner of the Women's Mental Health Network. So both Paula and I are quite new to our roles, so we are new to the Women's Health Network, but as Louise touched on previously, we have been part of the network and there from the beginning since 2018. We are so happy so many people have attended today, and we're really looking forward to the rest of the lunchtime learning session. As I say, it's our first one, so please forgive us with a few tech difficulties we've had on the way, but hopefully as we progress, it will get better and more clear. So we just wanted to talk briefly about the network's plans for the rest of 2026 concerning both events and coordinating newsletters. So through our work, we have seen a lot of interest in a number of topics, such as neurodiversity, which we're really looking forward to discussing today, perinatal mental health, psychological impact of a heart event, and the impact of AI on mental health, and many more. We would be really interested in hearing from you about what topics you would like to see highlighted. If you would like to put some topics in the chat, please feel free to. We would really appreciate that, and we would note them. And we will also be sharing a survey after this event for further feedback. As I said, this is our first lunchtime learning event, and we hope to do more events of this format. I think this is really a learning curve today. But yes, I think it's been so great to have a remote event and hopefully more accessible for everybody. And we also plan to do 2 more in-person events, one coming up in October, which we plan to host at St. Patrick's Mental Health Services. And then we hope to do a casual event towards the end of the year, kind of a Christmas mixer, an opportunity to mingle together, meet other members of the network, and also just reflect on the year, and then also to hear from you guys what you hope to see in 2027 as well. And then finally, the newsletter. So thank you so much for your continued engagement with the newsletter. I really appreciate every single month. I'm Maya, the one you email all your suggestions to in your research. And we really, really love that we have this place to spotlight all the amazing research and work that everyone in this network is doing. And we would really appreciate any feedback you have on this newsletter. For example, topics that you feel like you're not seeing in the newsletter, or anything you'd like us to focus a little bit more on moving forward. And we will continue to get an issue out to you every single quarter. So without any further delay, I will introduce Catherine O'Keefe, our first speaker this morning, who will be exploring key themes relating to neurodiversity and women's mental health in midlife and menopause. Catherine O'Keefe is a menopause workplace consultant, founder of Wellness Warrior, and creator of the Menopause Success Summit. Catherine is the author of the bestseller, All You Need to Know About Menopause. Catherine hosts Ireland's only podcast dedicated to menopause, Menopause Uprising. She helps organizations implement a comprehensive menopause strategy that leads to meaningful change. She's helped hundreds of companies choose support over silence, including Workday International, State Street, Department of Health, Sainsbury's, and Microsoft. Catherine is on a mission to shatter the menopause taboo for good. So thank you, Catherine, and I'll hand it over to you.
Lovely. Thanks, Maya. Sorry, I was just replying to one of the messages there on women's financial wellness. I just got a broadsheet on that today. So Deirdre, if you want to link with me on LinkedIn, I can happily send that on to you. Oh, Linda Murray, hey, how are you? Lovely to see you. So lovely to see some familiar faces. And just before we start, in the chat box, give me a why if you've ever heard this statement. You know, if you've ever heard someone say they're just hormonal or she's just hormonal, just give me a why in the chat box. when we talk about hormones, you know, one of the things, loads of answers there. So we can all relate to that from, you know, from a very young age, from adolescence. This is something we hear so much. And hormones don't just affect mood. They influence brain chemistry, they influence cognition, and for neurodivergent people, it can amplify these challenges. And that's really what I want to delve into today. I think I have 15 minutes now. As many of you know, I could talk till the cows come home. So I'm going to try and keep this as succinct. So if I'm right, I need to stop at about 1:10. So Maya, give me a flag if I'm going on too long. So when we look at it, there's a few key cornerstones to be aware of. So first off, the three aspects that come in together, we have the brain. And as I mentioned, those beautiful hormones, which are beautiful, we kind of have a very mixed relationship with them. But our hormones, we can't survive without all of our hormones, from cortisol to dopamine, serotonin, all of it. But we've three pieces that come in and intersect. So we have the brain, the messages, we have the hormones, and of course we have neurodiversity, which is what we're talking about today. So if we look at the hormones, we're talking about puberty, we're talking about menstruation, we're talking about infertility to pregnancy, and then of course perimenopause, menopause, which is reverse puberty. So at the beginning, when we talk about adolescence, the hormones are coming up. When we get to the end of the timeline and we're moving towards post-menopause, menopause, the hormones are going down. So it's reverse puberty. And all of this will have an impact at different life stages. And when we bring the brain into it, there's those beautiful hormones. There's the dopamine, which is a really important one when we talk about ADHD in particular. We also have serotonin. And those hormones, in addition to the female hormones, estrogen and testosterone, progesterone, they're all going to impact how the brain is functioning, the executive functioning, the sensory aspects, etc. And then we bring in the additional layer for our colleagues if you're neurodivergent. And when we then look at the impact on mental health, we're talking about anxiety, we're talking about masking, particularly for females. Masking is inherent. If we look at it, young boys are diagnosed as being neurodivergent much quicker than young girls. That's changing now because what we're seeing is that many women in their early to mid 30s are being diagnosed as being neurodivergent. Now, hopefully we're going to see that age coming back as we've more awareness and, you know, we kind of get ahead of the backlogs that we have in relation to diagnosis. But the mental health aspects are huge. You know, there's the masking I mentioned, there's the burnout, there's the depression, there's the sleep, there's the psychological. When we talk about our hormones and being neurodivergent, I always say it's like the iceberg analogy. So if you think about it, above the surface, you can see if someone's forgetful. You can see if someone's kind of emotionally dysregulated, that they're under pressure. And what's often labeled as being difficult. But underneath the surface, this is where we have the broad spectrum of being neurodivergent, ADHD, autism, dyspraxia, dyscalculia, etc. And then that feeds all into those mental health aspects, as I just mentioned. And most of what happens, people, when it comes to hormones, most of it is underneath the surface. And it's really important to understand this because that's where we really get to understand what's happening when we talk about our hormones and being neurodivergent. So I'm just going to share some slides with you now. And just to mention too, if anyone has any questions at all that they'd like to ask, please feel free, just put them in the chat box and maybe with time at the end where I can go through them. So I just mentioned earlier in relation to the hormones. So the hormonal timeline every single stage of this timeline is changing hormonal shifts, and they're major, they're not light. And they are all going to amplify the neurodivergent traits and the mental health symptoms that you're experiencing at every single stage. Unfortunately, we know young girls, when they come into the menstruation side of chapter, masking has already come in. But what happens is, by the time you get, maybe it's a pregnancy chapter, or you come into perimenopause, what happens? The hormonal change that's happening, it's too much. And now it's like the wheels come off the car. It's like it's too much to handle. And that's where the symptoms become amplified. So when you get to, it could be because of pregnancy, or generally we're now seeing in perimenopause, it's like menopause on steroids. So the experience for a neurotypical person can be very challenging, as we know, given the wide array of symptoms that come with menopause. But if you're neurodivergent, it's going to be far more challenging for the majority of women. And that's what, and you know, what we're now seeing is that so many women are being diagnosed as being neurodivergent when they come in or before the perimenopause years, because it just all becomes too much. So understanding that perimenopause can be that culminating chapter, but please know that from puberty, when the hormones start to change, for neurodivergent people, it's like you're adding fuel to the fire. And it's that brain aspect where things become more challenging. Now, if we look at the spectrum, and as we know, it's a wide spectrum, so from ADHD to autism, etc. When we look at the changes and how people are impacted, there's great strengths. And I have neurodivergent children. I am so passionate about empowering people to understand the strengths that come with being neurodivergent. But we've also got to understand and have compassion and understanding for the challenges that can come as well. So, for example, if I'm an ADHDer, by the time it comes to menstruation, I'm probably going to find that maybe I'm more tired. Everything's going to be more heightened for me in the majority of cases. It might be that as I come close to my periods, I might be just struggling with decision making, with executive functioning, with processing, with concentration, etc. So it's really important to understand that, because it adds an additional layer. The anxiety becomes more heightened. The low mood can be impacted more, particularly for young girls, when you look at the latter stages of the menstrual cycle, where progesterone starts to decline. You're more open to that susceptibility. And, you know, we don't have a lot of research on it, but when we look at PMDD, premenstrual dysphoric disorder, I would hesitate. My personal views would be that in many cases, those people could also be neurodivergent, which just amplifies that experience and makes it a much more deeply psychological event. And of course, then as we move through and we move into pregnancy, it's a huge hormonal change. So again, it's going to put pressure on the brain chemistry, and that will impact, as I mentioned, executive functioning, etc. So it's really important to understand that, because when we know that, we know how we can support, and we know that different stages will need different supports. For example, I do a lot of work in workplaces, and recently I was working with a workplace, and one of the team members was neurodivergent, and she was really struggling with the lights. They were fluorescent lights. They were really, really sensory-wise, they were really impacting. So we just looked at changing the lights. You can have other people where it's maybe that sensory, noise becomes much more, it's much more annoying. And that can happen from menstruation, pregnancy, all the way through. So it's just having the understanding is so important. And then, you know, just to reinforce again why the hormones matter. If we look at dopamine, the feel-good hormone, serotonin, the feel-good hormone, other hormones and stages of the cycles are going to impact these hormones. If we look at the menstrual cycle, by the time you come close to before your period starts, your serotonin is going to dip. Your progesterone, your estrogen's at an all-time low. Your progesterone is fluctuating, and it will have an impact. And we know that dopamine has a real big part to play when we come to the neurodivergent brain. And that will impact in relation to how you're feeling, your mood, you know, the low mood, etc. Your sleep is impacted. And it can look, as I mentioned earlier, the brain fog symptoms come in, the overwhelm, where your bounce back ability is impacted. Maybe before you would someone would say something and it bounces off you. Now it's more heightened. The sensory overload, as I mentioned there, it can be temperature, it can be light, it can be noise, etc. And the masking piece, we can often find, and I would see this particularly in workplaces, for our neurodivergent colleagues, it can be a struggle, difficult to ask for help. And it's really important that you start opening those conversations so that people feel comfortable to actually ask for help, because otherwise the anxiety increases and it leads to burnout. And we know burnout is so common for people on the neurodivergent spectrum. And hormones have a huge part to play when we come to that as well. And just, I have 3 minutes, so just look at the mental health impact, anxiety. And we all can relate to anxiety, but just remember it's anxiety on another level. It's maybe worrying about things that, you know, we may not think about, that others maybe just it doesn't even register. Whereas now it's more and you get caught in ruminating. And that is exhausting. We're not seeing it. Remember back to the iceberg, we're not seeing it all. But the exhaustion of keeping it all going is really, really challenging. Depression, as I mentioned, low mood is very common. And of course, we know also when you come to the perimenopause chapter, you know, the chances of depression and low mood become more heightened. Burnout is so common. I mean, the majority of people may have experienced burnout at some stage in their lives, but for our neurodivergent colleagues, it's at a much higher rate. Low self-esteem is so common. And again, just to go back to, we know menstruation puts a challenge on self-esteem, but so does perimenopause through to postmenopause, where if you're having a lot of symptoms, your confidence is chipped away at. And that feeds into everything, how you feel about yourself, etc. Emotional dysregulation, that bounce back ability is impacted. The sleep difficulties. And of course, if we're not sleeping, it impacts brain fog, becomes a catch-22. There's eating challenges, which are fed into kind of the emotional eating. You're eating maybe just because you're trying to fill gaps that are there from a mental health perspective. Sensory overwhelm, as I mentioned. And then, of course, you know, it's the chronic stress. We all need cortisol. Please ignore what social media might tell you. Cortisol is good, but the thing is, it's about keeping it in balance is what's really important. And it's kind of those difficulties in switching off. So, you know, when we look at all of these are not personal failings. They are real, they are valid, and there are aspects of a person's life that need understanding and need support. So when we look at supporting and understanding our neurodivergent colleagues, the first place to start is understanding the impact of our hormones. And always remember, you're only seeing a certain amount above the surface, back to that iceberg analogy, as I mentioned. And it's really having the compassion, the kindness, to understand what else might be going on beneath the surface and how can you support people at this stage. I'm just bang on time there. I know there's quite a few questions, and Maya, you can tell me if we've time at the end, maybe to answer them. That was a whistle stop tour. But you know, if anyone would like any additional information, this is an area I do a lot of research in, so please feel free to reach out to me directly as well.
Thank you so much, Catherine. That was great. Sorry, I was echoing again. Okay, great. Thank you, Catherine. So I can see there's a number of questions in the chat, and I'm sure people have a lot of questions after listening to that. So we will, after Shauna's presentation, have time for questions from everybody. And if we can just combine them from Catherine and then on to Shauna. So I will now introduce Shauna Bryan, who is from As I Am. And she will be speaking on the insights and perspectives on supporting the needs of neurodivergent women. Shauna is a community advisor at As I Am's Community Support Hub 2. Shauna holds a first class honors degree in psychology and has volunteered with Jigsaw, the National Centre for Youth Mental Health, and the Girls' Room, a women and non-binary only club night space. She currently volunteers with Soar Space, a creative and supportive community for women and non-binary people in Dublin. Shauna is a late diagnosed autistic woman who has a passion for mental health, autism, and advocacy in the autistic community, particularly for women, those who are late diagnosed or from marginalized communities. Her lived experience and academic knowledge help her to promote and create understanding, connection, and positive change. Shauna hopes to help raise awareness in the autistic community, and her work in As I Am helps individuals and their families to access the right resources and support. So thank you, Shauna. I'll hand it over to you now.
Hi, thank you. Hi guys, I'm Shauna. I work at As I Am. For any of you who don't know, As I Am is an autism charity. I work in Community Support Hub 2, and we support autistic people and their families. So I'm just going to share my screen now. Let's see. Can you guys see my screen? Sorry, I can't see anybody else. So if someone could just turn on their mic and let me know if they can see my screen.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay. Okay. So today I'll be speaking about insights and perspectives on supporting the needs of neurodivergent women. If you guys want to know anything about our hub, the Community Support Hub 2, we're in the Liberties, and the QR code is down there on the left as well, if you want more information. Okay, so today I'm going to talk about a few different topics. I'm going to talk about why autistic women may experience poorer mental health, why many of us are misdiagnosed or even later diagnosed. I'm going to talk about my own personal experience on that as well, and what happened after my diagnosis. And I'm going to talk about what I think needs to change, and what other people have also, I've heard from a lot of different people have a similar story to me, and what they also think needs to change. So, autistic women are significantly more likely to experience anxiety, depression, trauma, eating disorders, self-harm, suicidal thoughts, and burnout. And this isn't simply part of autism. A lot of mental health practitioners have told me that that's just part of your autism, and that you have to deal with that, basically. But that's not necessarily true. Of course, these things can be co-occurring at the same time, but often they're a result of years of masking, being misunderstood, sensory overload, not having your sensory needs met, repeated invalidation from healthcare workers, from society, unmet support needs, no accommodations, and also trying to survive in environments that aren't designed for us, unfortunately. And I think that's why a lot of these things actually come up. Okay. So why women are often missed is a thing that a lot of people are talking about, and there's a lot of, I think, hustle and bustle about women that are late diagnosed now, or like diagnosed later in life. especially in the mental health community. And I've seen it even in mental health services, people are recognizing it a lot more now. But unfortunately, as women in healthcare in general aren't focused on when it comes to like, studies and all these different things, that's the same with autism research. And it's primarily been focused on boys and men over the years. It was originally even thought that just only boys could have autism. Um, so yeah, and this means that a lot of women and girls are into mask, unfortunately. And masking is when you basically hide your symptoms, or you try and fit in to look not autistic. And this can be done by copying your friends. So like if you've seen your friends act in a certain way, you can also act that way. If you're seeing that your friends don't really stim, or they don't mind bright lights, you can try and act the same as them and suppress these traits that you can have. Also, by becoming a perfectionist, some people will try and hide their autistic traits so much to the point where they think about it all the time and they have to be correct all the time. And the same way, people pleasing is putting others' needs above yours. And then this leads to internalizing the distress, internal meltdowns. So often women won't show meltdowns on the surface, they'll often have it inside, and this can just feel like really it can feel like your whole world is ending inside your head, but you might look okay um on the outside. And this often leads to professionals being like, what's wrong with her, instead of thinking, oh, this could be autism. They often pathologize it and they make it like a mental health concern. Even though mental health concerns can come from doing that, it's not necessarily a first step, I think. So many autistic women often receive other diagnoses. Sometimes this can be misdiagnosed, or sometimes this can be co-occurring along with autism. This can be BPD, or emotionally unstable personality disorder, anxiety, depression, bipolar, complex PTSD, OCD, and ADHD. Now, these obviously can all co-occur as well. But sometimes it's just these labels of personality disorders, anxiety, depression, rather than looking at the neurodivergent part of what might be happening. And this leads to pathologizing the symptoms again. It leads to over prescribing medication in some cases. That's my experience. It can also lead to just not having the right treatment, not having the right therapy, not having the right access to services. And this can also as well lead to thinking that there's something wrong with you, and that you can't be fixed, or that you are going to have this thing be wrong for the rest of your life. So this is my own experience. I was a very shy child. I was highly masculine. This led to a lot of mental health issues in my teens. Um, I was seen by a private psychiatrist who suggested I had Asperger's when I was around 16 years old. From my therapist. I was then it didn't Nothing really came of that. I was then referred to adult mental health services when I was 18, and even though they knew that I had this suggestion, they immediately diagnosed me with BPD and anxiety at 18 years old. Um, this led to me being treated for BPD with different medications, different therapy and stuff for 6 years. Although some therapies for BPD can help being autistic as well, I don't think I got the right treatment. Um, I was then diagnosed autistic later at 24 years old after I brought it up after all that time. And then they considered, oh, maybe actually, yeah, maybe you're right. So I was diagnosed autistic, and then they also assessed me for ADHD, but I was told that I couldn't have ADHD because children can't mask hyperactivity. And I didn't run around and I didn't leave my seat, and that was in 2025, uh, last year. I was told that by a head psychiatrist, which is not accurate at all. Um, I was also assessed for OCD after I had some OCD symptoms, which I do think is correct, but I was then told that it was just my autism. So it's going one extreme or the other, it seems like, in with the in the healthcare. So then I didn't receive adequate care for my mental health either, or my neurodivergence. I was then discharged from the mental health system, um, and I was told that I just should access disability supports. When I accessed disability supports, they told me I needed to access mental health supports. So there's a gap there definitely, because people are telling me to go one way or the other. They're passing me around a little bit. And this is not only my experience, this is a lot of people's experiences that I have spoken to, that I've worked with. Um and it explains why there is still this I suppose, sorry, this is explaining to me that people are just trying to, pass them around and not kind of deal with the issue, because the education might not be there, or they don't have enough training, things like that. From my point of view, I needed professionals who understood me, who understood autism in women along with mental health. I needed it to be holistic, and I needed it to not be me being passed around, basically. I think that if I was met with curiosity, validation, autism informed care, and someone who really looked at care holistically, I think that the outcome for me over the last few years would have been very different. It would have led to a lot less trauma, fewer years believing there was something wrong with me, more appropriate supports, more appropriate medication, reduce burnout and improve quality of life, because I don't need to be fixed. I just need someone that understands and trusts me, to trust my own intuition as well. Um, so I think what needs to change is earlier recognition in women and girls. I know we're seeing that happen now, but it's still not good enough. Especially it's still not good enough when it's then being passed off, well, oh, you just have a disability, you need to access disability services, because autistic women deserve mental health care as well. We need autism informed mental health services in general, for people to understand what masking is, shutdowns. I had a mental health nurse tell me last year that she didn't know much about autism. That's also not good enough. We should be learning about this. People should be learning about this as a mental health nurse, because everybody has mental health issues. Just because you're autistic doesn't mean that you don't. We obviously know we need better diagnostic pathways in Ireland. Unfortunately, the pathways aren't great for children or for adults. There's no public pathways for adults at the moment. And I think that even if autistic people are accessing mental health services, they need to be considered. Autism needs to be considered if the symptoms are very clearly shown. Ongoing support after diagnosis, because it doesn't just end. Like it's not like I don't have any mental health needs, or people don't have any mental health needs after they're diagnosed autistic, especially when they have a long-standing mental health issues. I definitely think that there needs to be a more holistic, person-centered care in general in Ireland, but unfortunately, one person can't change that. That's just what I think, anyways. Um, I also think access to OT would be very beneficial for many autistic people, educated and empathetic people who support them. Understanding how the social, physical, and economic realities of our lives impact our mental health, because every aspect there affects your mental health. I think that STEM and autistic community are important part of recovery, and also understanding that burnout is different to depression. And I also think that it'd be very beneficial for people to ask specific questions, and to not make us want to make us appear less autistic. Yeah, so that's the end of my presentation. Thank you so much for listening to me. I'll pass it on now.
Okay, thank you so much, Shona. That was fantastic. And thank you so much for sharing your experiences. That was really, really valuable. So now we're going to open into Q&A. So you'll see us spotlighted on the main stage, I guess. And so please, if you could just raise your hand, your Zoom hand, and we will select you just by name and call you out. And then we will also spotlight you that way. And then if you could just say your name when you do come on, and your organization, and then also just say who your question is directed to. Of course, if it's just to both speakers, Shona and Catherine, that's no problem. That's fine. But if you want something specifically answered by Shona or Catherine, please just state that. And of course, feel free to put things into the chat. We'll try and get to the chat questions as well, but hopefully we will produce something after this as well, the event. And also just to note that
there are a lot of learning opportunities here in terms of resources that we can share with our networks, as well resources to advocate for ourselves and to be informed. And I think one of the objectives of this space is for actually to be able to share those resources and have them on hand as part of the network. So I'm very excited that this event took place, and I'm really excited about the other ones that are coming in the year, and I hope we can see you all there.
thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.